welcome everyone. Thank you so much. Today's P4C Spotlight is on reframing family engagement in school-based occupational therapy, insights and strategies. And I really appreciate all the interest in today's session. So I'll be presenting today, but this is on behalf of the whole P4C team. And so I'd love to see who is in the audience. So if you could, if you don't mind putting in the chat what your role is, where you're from, your geographic location, and then what sector or setting that you work in, that would really help me kind of see who is in the room today. Oh, wow, we have some people from Australia. That's really exciting. I'm not sure what time it is there, but thank you for coming. Most others are from Ontario. We have managers, OTs. That's great. Okay, thank you so much for doing that. That gives me some good insight into who's here. Okay. And so for today, our session today will aim to discuss family engagement in pediatric therapy services. We'll examine the unique nature of the school setting and various roles in family engagement, so the OT role and the family role, etc. We'll review and apply the model of family engagement in school-based rehabilitation. We'll outline strategies for improving family engagement in school-based rehabilitation settings. And most importantly, we'll hear your thoughts and experiences with family engagement. Okay, so when you see the term family engagement, what words come to mind in relation to your practice? So if you wouldn't mind scanning the QR code here to enter in some words that come to mind, I will pull up a little word cloud that is developed from all of your insights. I see people adding their words in. I'm going to stop sharing and then pull up the screen. It also has the QR code on it if you haven't had a chance yet. So 1 second. So we see here partners, teamwork, feedback, collaboration, active listening, direction, coaching, connection, empowerment, knowledge translation, participation, sharing, goal setting, working together. These are all amazing positive words. I see history. I'd love to know more about that word. Involvement. Anything challenging that comes to mind when you see the term family engagement? Give it a couple more seconds. But I really love here that collaboration is the biggest word right in the middle. That is key, and that's what we're going to talk about lots today. So I think that's all. So I will stop sharing that and get back to the presentation. So occupational therapists have the theoretical view that children and their families are inseparable from each other and the environments that they live in. Families are the key holders to vital information regarding a child's interests, their strengths and needs, and they are typically the only constant in the child's life as they grow and develop. So engaging with families and following family-centered principles is considered best practice in OT. Family-centered principles include acknowledging families as experts about their child and as essential team members on the treatment team. It's providing interventions tailored to families' individual characteristics and needs, and designing interventions focused on supporting family functioning overall. Beyond theoretical reasons for engaging with families, family-centered practice has been shown to improve child outcomes and parent satisfaction with services. Unfortunately, research has also shown that the ability for the therapist to provide family-centered care relies heavily on their practice setting. So most researchers who have studied family engagement focus on settings where the family brings the child to the service location, such as a clinic-based setting. In these settings, the OT has an opportunity to interact with the family each time the child attends a therapy session. Family engagement in these settings is primarily determined by the family's actions and behaviors in the treatment session. And for example, researchers at Holland Bloorview have recently created a tool called Prime P, which is a self-report measure that asks parents what they thought, how they felt, and what they did during the child's therapy session, and how the session has affected their overall feelings about the intervention process. So this measures the affective, cognitive, and behavioral components of parental engagement in pediatric rehab in a clinic-based setting. Additionally, this model, the Phoenix theory of attendance, participation, and engagement, was developed specifically for clinic-based services, but is important to keep in mind in terms of all the factors influencing the family. It uses a road trip metaphor. The family vehicle is depicted as a car or a bike, and it represents the family composition, the number of adults contributing to care, and the number of children in the family. And the working condition reflects everyone in the family's physical and mental health. The road symbolizes how complex the service system is. The more organizations and professionals involved with the family, the more challenging the journey can be. The parents have gears that need to work together to move well, and this includes their skills, their feelings, their knowledge, their values, and the relationships with professionals. Along the way, grease and grit, both positive and negative factors, can make the process smoother or harder. And the ultimate destination is children's well-being and participation in life. And when we think about services that take place in the school setting, the child typically is seen by the OT without their family present. The educational context presents a unique challenge for therapists in building relationships with families, providing family-centered care, and ensuring best practice. And although the previous research on family engagement specific to school-based OT is limited, some studies have explored family engagement in pediatric OT more generally and have included school-based OTs in their studies. And this research highlights some of the contextually related challenges that therapists face in family engagement and concludes that school-based OTs generally do not describe their practice as being family-centered. So one study that our team completed explored the factors that influence the family-therapist relationship in school-based OT. This was specific to the Partnering for Change service delivery model, but certainly some factors would likely transcend all service delivery models in schools. And we identified 5 main factors that influenced family-therapist relationships, which are listed here on the screen. The first is competing demands. And this is the competing demands for both the therapists and the families. And they can both, so they're both competing demands, and it limits the amount of time that they can spend collaborating. Their consistency and availability. So when is the therapist at the school? Are they available to the families? Do the families know when the OT will be there? Number 3 is readiness, awareness, and buy-in. Do families know what OT even is? Do they understand why their child might need OT? Do they value the service? Do OTs believe that the time required to engage with families will be worth the effort if families may not respond or are not able to reach back out to you? And number 4, relationships with schools and educators. Does the school encourage family engagement in the children's education? Do they have trust with the families? And finally, demographic factors. Overall, each school and neighborhood has a different demographic makeup that can impact the way information is received or understood by families. And this ultimately impacts how therapists can build relationships with families. So you can see how the factors are unique to the school setting and how family engagement in this context can be especially challenging when compared to a clinic setting. So when we hear the term family engagement, we think about what the family does or doesn't do. But as we can see, there are many factors that influence if and how a family can engage. And this becomes more complicated when the family isn't necessarily present with the therapist and the child. But what does family engagement really mean? A major issue with research on family engagement in rehab is that there is no universal definition. Without a clearly defined concept, it's difficult to expand knowledge and conduct research that's beyond exploratory in nature. And the research that I published as part of my PhD contributes to the development of this concept and presents a definition for consideration. So I'll share that now. So we came up with the idea that family engagement is a multifaceted umbrella term used to describe team members. So that includes families, service providers, educators, and other important team members' attitudes and actions towards a child's progress and development, and the dynamic process team members participate in to support a child's progress and development across multiple environments. Family engagement is characterized by strong relationships between team members, encompassing trust and effective communication. Power is shared amongst team members, but roles and responsibilities are shaped by the team members' abilities and the individualized needs of the family and may depend on their culture and past experiences. So in my conceptualization of family engagement, the spotlight shifts from what the family does or does not do to how the team members function to meet the needs of the family and the child. Family engagement includes the attitudes, the abilities, and the actions of all the team members, and only works well when all team members contribute to the process. So with the purpose of informing school-based practice and potentially family engagement in rehab more broadly, I have developed the model of family engagement in school-based rehabilitation to illustrate the salient features of family engagement and to demonstrate the factors that influence it. The model I developed was informed by the revised theoretical model of parental involvement and the theory of overlapping spheres of influence, both from the education literature, and it incorporates the findings from my dissertation work. So in the theory of overlapping spheres of influence, Epstein, the author, describes how forces related to the family and school act on the spheres and lead to further overlap of the spheres or separation of the spheres. And in this new model, the family, the educator, and the therapist all influence family engagement, which ultimately influences the child's overall development. So the forces acting on the spheres in the model of family engagement in school-based rehab include each team member's skills, beliefs, expectations, time, and resources. And each force impacts how the team member in that sphere engages, and eventually the degree of overlap between the three spheres. Some forces may pull a sphere further away from the other spheres, and other forces may push a sphere inwards. Additionally, there's overlap between the adjacent spheres, representing the relationship between each pair of team members. So the more the adjacent sphere overlaps, the stronger the relationship will be. And the stronger the relationships are between the team members, the larger the overlap between all three spheres. And the relationships are shaped by trust, communication, and shared power. Without ample trust, effective communication, and power sharing, the adjacent overlap between the spheres will lessen, thus negatively impacting the relationship between the team members and family engagement overall in the middle. And then we look at the circles surrounding the spheres, and there are contextual factors that also influence family engagement. So specifically, the service and school factors impact the forces that move the spheres, the ability to form strong relationships, and ultimately the amount of overlap between each of the spheres. For example, the socio-demographics of the school and what service delivery model is being used. Overall, this image illustrates when the factors that influence family engagement in school-based rehab are ideal, contributing to much overlap between the spheres, good relationships with all team members, and maximum family engagement. So now let's look at an example of when the factors that influence family engagement are not in the ideal form. Let's imagine a scenario where a principal has not been has not been overly welcoming to the school community. The school is large, the needs are high, the educators seem to be running on fumes. It's probably a very common scenario for everybody. The administrators are putting out fires. They don't seem to have the time to engage with school-based support staff. The OT is perhaps newer to the role and still gaining confidence. So I want you to think about what factors are at play. What would happen to the spheres? What would happen to the relationships? And how would this ultimately impact family engagement? So when we look at the model, we see that these spheres are all pulling apart. The relationships are lessening and there is minimal to no family engagement. When principals do not create a welcoming community-based culture, there is typically no emphasis on family engagement, no invitation to families into the school community, and there might be less trust, communication, and shared power between the family and the educators, leading to less overlap between the family-educator relationship. And our research has shown that these schools tend to not be as welcoming to therapists either, and that this culture trickles down to the educators. So there could be less trust, communication, and shared power between the therapist and the educator, leading to less overlap between this relationship as well. And the educators might have different beliefs, expectations about what the therapist or the family should be doing in terms of their roles. And their principals might not provide them with the time or the resources to engage with families or therapists in a way that promotes family engagement in SBRS services. And as a newer OT, they might not feel confident to reach out to educators or families. And it can be challenging when they might not have an ally at the school to help introduce them. So many factors like how welcoming the administrators are, the sense of community, the size of the school, the needs within the school, all impact the ability to build foundational relationships and engage with each other. When schools are not welcoming, they don't have a strong sense of community engagement, the spheres will pull away, leading to weaker relationships between the partners and less family engagement overall. And sometimes a strongly skilled OT can help to overcome some of these barriers, but it can be tricky and it requires a lot of confidence. So sometimes even building a relationship with just one educator can open the door to so much. So just keep that in mind. All right, another scenario. Let's imagine a family is new to Canada, trying to find employment and experiencing food and housing insecurity. They deeply care for their child and their child's needs, but you have been unable to connect with them. In the classic understanding of family engagement, this family would not be described as engaged. The family sphere is drifting away from the others. But what forces can we utilize to develop a strong family therapist relationship? What might that look like? Are there any forces we cannot overcome? Let's see. So as you can see here, family factors of time and resources are influencing the level of engagement here. The family sphere is pulling to the side, and there's not much overlap at all between the family and the therapist because there's no communication or shared power, despite having some trust. There is a little overlap with the family and the educator, but not much overlap of family engagement overall. We see the therapist and the educator relationship is quite strong in this scenario, which can be helpful in overcoming some of these other factors. So here we can utilize their relationship with the school to help connect with them. Have the educator introduce you in an email or schedule a virtual appointment. Get creative about how you can connect with families. Sometimes having the school book the meeting can be helpful. And you can also let family choose whether it's a phone call or a Zoom. Some families need more support than others, and the support might look different for different needs. This model reinforces the idea of taking an individualized approach, having conversations at the beginning of service if possible, and talking to the educator to determine what has worked well for them in the past, and what can be helpful to understanding the approach that this family might need. And still, if we're still having troubles connecting with families, then we might have to go to more of the tier 1 approach. And tier 1 can be a great place to start in building awareness of what OT is, building that trust, and starting these conversations with families. So again, here's the model in its ideal form with all the factors that are influencing family engagement in the center. And now we're going to break out into groups to think about examples in your practice that could be explained by this model. And we want you to kind of reflect about all the factors that are at play and discuss this with your group. And then at the end, we'll come back all together and we will have each group share kind of one example that they came up with and describing the factors that are at play. And if you have some strategies for how to address that, that would be great too. Okay, so that's our ideal model. So some strategies for improving family engagement. So these are the things that we kind of came up with. Therapists are urged to consider ways to reduce the demands on families by offering flexible options related to ways of connecting and communicating. So things we've already talked about today. One option may be to explore possibilities of using virtual healthcare with your manager and your service delivery teams, providing flexible options for communication about services, and allowing families to choose which option works best for them may lead to equitable opportunities for increased family engagement. And therapists are also encouraged to engage in conversations about families' strengths, their cultural identities, their individual needs at the beginning of service in order to provide more individualized and culturally sensitive care. Having conversations at the beginning of service can manage expectations and provide insight into roles and responsibilities. And it is recommended that therapists broaden their definition of family engagement beyond a school-centric or therapist-centric view of what it means to be engaged, and to consider our newly proposed definition. Therapists should commit to a strength-based approach and focus on what families are doing well rather than what they are not doing. Therapists are also encouraged to utilize relationships with educators, like we chatted about already, to better connect with families. Therapists should try to make their presence known in the school community and become part of the school culture. And the model today outlines the many forces that influence family engagement. And therapists are encouraged to use reflective practice and consider their own skills, beliefs, expectations, and how they may be impacting family engagement. And that being said, school-based OT should also show themselves some compassion because they are working in a complex system that produces many inherent barriers to family engagement. And to support therapists in expanding services to be more inclusive and flexible for families, therapists need protected time to call families, to meet over Zoom, to respond to families, to wait for families and see them at school pickup, etc. So this is imperative for relationship building and for family engagement. And not having this protected time leads to therapists being unable to complete this important work. And it's also important to note that the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services has identified that child and family-centered care is a guiding principle. So it recognizes that the family is the only constant in the child's life as they age and grow, and the family is the expert in the child's needs and abilities. As part of their foundational program elements, the family needs to be considered as an equal member of the care team and the driver of care based on their preferences, their needs, and their resources. And this just reinforces the need for organizations to ensure that therapists have an appropriate amount of time to engage with families, especially in settings where the family is not physically present always. So key takeaways: Families are typically engaging as best they can. This model provides perspective when thinking about everything working for or against family engagement and takes a strength based approach by encouraging therapists to focus on what factors are influencing the family's behaviors rather than what they are simply doing or not doing. Some families will need more support than others, and the support might look different for different needs. We need to take an individualized approach. Having conversations at the beginning of service can be helpful to understanding what approach that family might need. And the model of family engagement in school-based rehab provides a framework for considering all the factors influencing family engagement. It encourages OTs to consider where they can act, what is or isn't within their control, and what the next best approach is. Sometimes there are too many factors pulling the spheres apart that are simply out of the OT's control. And these cases highlight the importance of tier 1 services and building awareness, trust, and showing the impact OT can have firsthand. So, final reflections, I just want you to think about after today, what is one change that you can make to better engage with families? And what reflections can you share back with your colleagues? So, if you take a couple minutes after today's session and just jot a few things down, that would be great and helpful for your learning. And that is all.